Underneath a quiet suburban home, the basement had always carried a heavy, cold feeling. It wasn't the creaking of old wood or the faint smell of damp concrete that made it unsettling. Um, it was something more, something unexplainable. The house belonged to Emma, a young woman who had recently moved in after her grandmother's passing. The property was an inheritance, a fresh start, or so she thought. The basement was included in the deal, an expansive space with boxes stacked high, untouched since her grandmother's time. Emma didn't bother with it much. It was just a basement. At least, that's what she told herself. One evening, while organizing her grandmother's things upstairs, Emma came across an old leather-bound journal. It was weathered, the pages yellowed, and the handwriting inside was her grandmother's. The entries were mostly mundane, documenting daily life. Except for one. The date was from 10 years ago, and the writing was erratic, rushed. It read, "If you hear the whispers, do not respond. Do not go downstairs at night." Emma frowned. Rereading the words, it felt strange, out of place. Her grandmother wasn't the type to believe in superstitions or write cryptic warnings. She chalked it up to old age or a bad dream and placed the journal aside. At night, as Emma lay in bed, she was startled awake by a faint sound. A rhythmic tapping, almost like footsteps, coming from below. She froze, her breath catching. It had to be the pipes, or maybe the house settling, she thought. But the sound grew louder, steady, deliberate. It wasn't random creaks. It was something, or someone, moving. I know, gathering her courage, she tiptoed down the hallway and stopped at the basement door. She pressed her ear to the wood, holding her breath. Silence. Slowly, she turned the knob and peered down the staircase. The basement was pitch black, the air thick with a strange stillness. She switched on the light, but the bulb flickered weakly before going out completely. Emma cursed under her breath and closed the door. It could wait until morning. The next day, she bought a new bulb and ventured into the basement. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of mildew. Dust swirled in the light from her flashlight as she scanned the room. Boxes, an old dresser, a few broken chairs. Everything looked normal. But as she moved further into the room, her foot nudged something small. She bent down and picked it up. It was a child's toy, a small wooden top. She didn't remember seeing it before. Odd, but not alarming. Over the following nights, the noises continued, tapping, faint whispers, and sometimes what sounded like a dragging sound. Emma's sleep became restless, plagued by vivid nightmares. In her dreams, she was standing in the basement, staring at a shadow in the corner. It didn't move, didn't speak, but its presence was suffocating. Each night, she woke up drenched in sweat. The image of the shadow burned into her mind. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Emma decided to record the basement while she slept. She set up her phone on a chair at the bottom of the stairs, its camera pointed toward the room. The next morning, she retrieved the phone, her heart pounding as she pressed play. For the first few hours, the footage was uneventful, just an empty, silent basement. But around 3:12 a.m., the screen showed movement. A huge, faint, barely perceptible shadow darted across the room. She replayed it over and over, convincing herself it was a trick of the light, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. Determined to find answers, Emma began digging into her grandmother's past. She visited the local library, poring over old records and newspapers. What she found sent chills down her spine. Decades ago, before her grandmother owned the house, it belonged to a man named Thomas Greer. He was a reclusive carpenter, rumored to have a strange obsession with building hidden compartments and secret rooms. In 1974, Greer vanished without a trace. No one knew what happened to him, but neighbors often reported hearing noises coming from the house long after it was abandoned. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something of Greer's was still there, buried in the basement. That night, armed with a crowbar and a flashlight, she descended the stairs. She began tapping on the walls, listening for hollow spaces. After hours of searching, she found it. A section of the wall that sounded different. Behind the wall was a small, hidden room. The air inside was stifling, untouched for decades. In the center of the room was a wooden chair, and on it sat a life-sized doll. Its face was cracked porcelain, its glassy eyes staring blankly ahead. Emma's heart raced as she approached it. Tucked into the doll's lap was an envelope. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words scrawled in jagged handwriting. Leave it alone. Before she could process the message, she heard a faint, raspy whisper behind her. Get out. Spinning around, she saw nothing but darkness. The flashlight flickered, and in the split second before it went out, she saw the shadow. It was taller than any human, its form distorted, as if it were being stretched and pulled by invisible forces. Emma bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind her. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she called a moving company. Within a week, she was gone, leaving the house and its secrets behind. Months later, a new family moved in. They didn't know about Emma or the doll hidden behind the wall, but on their first night, as they settled into bed, they heard tapping, faint whispers, and a voice from the basement saying, "Get out."